Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Hello.
Hey, Joes.
Hey, Jonas. Did Alex accept this time slot, Jonas?
Yeah, he did. I mean, we verbally talked about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so give it a few minutes, but
I'm wondering where the other guys from EMA as well. Let me ping them.
yeah, Mutu accepted. William accepted. Alex did tentative again, but it was his proposal.
Yeah, Mutu will be joining in a minute, Jonas.
Yep.
Hello, guys.
Hi.
Good morning.
Hello, Ian.
So, yeah, we get some more people now. Muthu's here. Daniel. Very
Good
good. And we have Intel, Rafal.
Hi, good morning.
Hi. Very good. Oh, that means we have quorum. William. Hello.
Hello.
So, let's see here. So the one proposal we wanted to talk about today was the Cisco API thingy. Well, there is also this northbound SDK. I don't know if we get to that today. I didn't think we put that up there, but apparently we did. Perhaps I did. I can give you an overview and see what you guys think, but it's an odd one. So Martin, did you want to drive this one, the Cisco APIC control plugin?
I can do if you like.
Yes, I like.
Oh, okay.
You wrote the proposal, so it's very fitting.
Well, I suppose I did. Hang on, caller. So shall I share and talk about?
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay. you see my screen?
Nope.
Not yet.
Oh, that's disappointing. Hang on then.
Now something is happening.
Let me know when you can see this.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, so the idea really is, and this has been discussed a couple of times, I guess, is to build an APIC plugin for Cisco. So APIC is the controller that Cisco have for their Ethernet switching infrastructure. And the reason why this is an interesting idea is that Cisco is a predominant player in the telco space, and so in terms of building a a common management API for both compute storage as well as for networking, it seemed appropriate along the same lines as we'd want to build a plugin for Dell alongside the generic Redfish one. We also build a plugin for for networking. So for that, one for Cisco would make a lot of sense. So I had a little bit of a look at this in terms of the the model that Cisco used for APIC to manage their switch infrastructure, and it's pretty similar, as it turns out, to the model that we've extended Redfish. Basically the fabric set of schemas within Redfish to support Ethernet switching is very similar to Cisco as well. So this diagram that you see in here sort of shows some of those synergies. So the diagram is actually from Cisco. Starting from their policy universe, as they call it, and then below that you have tenants and access for configuring sort of physical side of things. So if you look at each of those, I guess, schema types within Redfish, then, there are equivalency there. So the policy universe is equivalent to the entire fabric. A tenant you could make equivalent to what we call the default zone within Redfish, and then sitting under that tenant, then you have application profiles in Cisco, which would be applicable of a zone with a zone type of zone of zones, and then endpoint groups, which are kind of the key tenant, the core principle behind APIC anyway, are these endpoint groups. And the endpoint groups actually match really nicely to a zone type within Redfish called, which is zone of endpoints. And then each of those endpoint groups obviously group sets of endpoints, and we have the equivalency there within within Redfish and the fabric schema as well. So we extended the Redfish fabric set of schemas to also include an address pool schema. And the idea behind the address pool schema is that you can assign addressing then for an entire fabric, as well as for the end hosts that would connect into that fabric. And so from that perspective, you have things like in Cisco, like bridge domains, subnets, domain profiles with VLAN instances, etc. So the address pool schema that we have within Redfish can then provide addressing for each of those schema types within APIC. So that's basically what I sort of try to relay in this in this description is, is just how nicely aligned the mapping is between Redfish and Cisco. So what you then end up with then are the set of steps, and this is just my suggestion, but obviously, the implementers of the plugin would need to verify and, and come up with their own way of doing this. But, as a suggestion, then, the following set of steps could be used to set up host-host communications across the fabric. And so the way that you would do that is by, doing things like setting up VLAN domains and assigning a range of VLANs to it. So this is what you would do in Cisco. And the way that you can do that, as I was saying earlier, is through, the VLAN range coming from address pools from a northbound client. So you would have a Redfish address pool that could then be used as the basis for setting up a VLAN domains and the range of VLANs associated to it. Then that could then be applied across the entire fabric. You would then specify VLAN domain port members, and those are the leaf switches and interfaces VLAN domain apply to. So that would come from the connected port links, which again would be assigned by a northbound client of setting up, as part of setting up the fabric. You could then create a tenant within Cisco's APIC and bridge domains, and that would be done on a per zone that's configured within Redfish with a zone type of zone of endpoints, and then allocate IP subnets as part of that, which would come from the address pools. So those host subnets would be obtained from the address pool links to a zone with zone type is zone of endpoints, create VRFs and application profiles, and then endpoint groups for every zone with zone type of zone of endpoints. So every time that you create a zone with a zone type of zone of endpoints, you could then create an associated endpoint group in Cisco because there's a one-to-one correlation between them. And the VLAN tags would then come from the address pools that's linked with that zone of zone type of, the zone type equals zone of endpoints, because you have address pools linked to zones of endpoints. So, and then you would associate the endpoint groups to the set of ports that's listed in the zone with zone types, again, of zone of endpoints. So you have, to me, it's fairly feasible to be able to, to go ahead and, and build this plugin and have quite a nice association between, the APIC calls and what you would need to configure up, by a northbound client into ODIM as part of the Redfish fabric schema. Now, yeah, go ahead.
So Martin, I guess this is the use case set up host-to-host communication, but also when the plugin comes up, like we saw on some commercial plugins that are also fabric managers, they have to sort of get a fabric in place and well, basically send out an event about this fabric as a resource created, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's where you can start making changes to that fabric, right? So
yeah.
that's another use case. But so we can keep adding those, I guess.
Yeah, and that can be done sort of fairly autonomously from the plugin itself, right? So the plugin's going to know when the fabric is ready to be configured, and then it can just do that northbound interaction then into ODIM, right, for saying, hey, there's a fabric here, raise that alert, and then a northbound client could then go and associate a set of an address pool for that entire fabric for setting up the over and underlay addressing if they wanted to. There is one piece that's actually missing inside Redfish, which we're looking to address as part of the DMTF, and that's this last line that I've got in this proposal. And this is something that Cisco has, but I think it's actually a pretty generic thing in terms of when you have sets of common endpoint, common entities, i.e., you have a set of end hosts that want to communicate with other sets of end hosts across the fabric, or So, you know, for east-west communications, or from a set of hosts that want to communicate outside of that fabric, then you would need to have policies for how you should treat that traffic, right? And those policies are roughly split into two areas. One of them is for access control, i.e., you know, what communications are we actually going to allow on a per application basis, you know, from host to host. And then the second one is quality of service, i.e. how will we want to treat those packets once they're transiting the fabric, right? And so from that perspective, you know, Cisco have what they call contracts for that sort of end, you know, endpoint communications. Within Redfish, we have what are called connections, which could be modeled in a similar way. But the thing that's actually missing then is how do you tie a policy to a connection in Redfish, because that doesn't exist in DMTF today. So there are some discussions going on in terms of, again, extending the fabrics model so that we can have something like a connections policy that we could link then into connections. And then within that connections policy, we could then specify QoS and access control, you know, like I just described and what's supported in Cisco. Once we have that implemented in DMTF, which I think, you know, we should be able to get for, you know, at least before the end of first half of next year, we could look to add that to this this plugin as well, so that we could actually have, you know, host-to-host communications policy configured as well, as, you know, as part of this. And then obviously, you know, from a generic perspective, that same model would then apply for anybody's fabric. You know, in this case it'd be Cisco, but then, you know, if we wanted to build plugins for Juniper or Arista or anybody else, that, you know, they could use those same principles as well. Okay.
And this is being addressed as well in the upcoming composition service to use these type of capabilities in the fabric model to set up host-to-host communication when you do composition. Is it, Martin?
Yeah. So in the current, you know, so the composition service has been extended at the moment to include things like multi-tenancy and manifests, etc. And so it's been done, you know, the primary use case at the moment is for compute resources. But I've had conversations with the author of it. And the idea will be that over time, then we would extend the composition service to also include fabric, so that, you know, once you've composed a compute resource, you can then set up communications, you know, connectivity from those end hosts, you know, across a switch fabric using that same composition service. So yeah, it'll be coming as well as part of the composition service.
Yep, and it's kind of a needed thing for Redfish to be useful in those type of use cases, I guess. There are not a lot of questions here. I guess it's more of a model mapping. The Redfish fabric model mapped to the Cisco ACI model, right? And that's the reason that mapping is in place is to show that this is doable. Obviously, we have a plugin, commercial plugin on the HB side for something else, for one of our fabric managers. But this is just showing that it's doable for Cisco. So a lot of telcos and others are using Cisco. So it would be a handy thing to have in the project to be able to show those use cases, I think, personally. Any questions around this? Or, I mean, we wanted to get ready to vote on this one to see if we can get it through, and somebody could potentially grab this and start working on it.
So yeah, just a quick question on the implementation. So so will this be then that it can be implemented as a generic part that could potentially extend them to other controllers, and then a Cisco specific part, or will it be implemented as one big kind of Cisco specific part? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think because of the proprietary nature of some of these controllers, I think we will have plugins for different vendors, just like we do with servers, right? so there will be a plugin for Cisco, and there might be a plugin for something else like Juniper or what have you in the future. The reason we want an open source, lightweight, or an open source plugin for Cisco is that I think that will allow us as a project to go out and do some proof of concepts and things with Cisco stuff. But
This goes back to, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, this goes back to what we were discussing last week about, for example, as long as, for example, this is a great example of a plugin that encompasses a different view of the redfish that probably is not currently implemented on other part of ODIM. But at the same time, by maintaining this on its own plugins repo, this plugin can evolve far more rapidly than the core, onboarding the features that are being consumed or used by customer that may be interested on this, without the core being basically a stop for this or holding this or vice versa.
Yeah.
So this is actually a great example on why that isolation is or loosely coupled basically methodology is extremely good because it benefits both sides.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And you know, and what I would have said to the earlier question as well, you know, in terms of that modularity, is that, you know, obviously the idea behind this plugin is to open source it, and so there's no reason at all why, you know, if this was implemented for Cisco, you know, Jonas is absolutely correct that, you know, each of the vendors have their own proprietary ways of managing their switch fabrics, as we all know. But the north, you know, from the sort of plugin into ODIM, those API calls would be pretty generic across all of the different vendors. It's only southbound really from the plugin into the, you know, into the actual controller of the, you know, of each of the vendors' implementations. All of that would be proprietary and have to be rewritten. So you'd kind of, you know, have the same, you know, northbound you know, communications channels for the plugin into ODIM. You know, kind of doesn't matter too much about, you know, whose implementation it is. It's just from the plugin then into the infrastructure would have to be written for each vendor. So, you know, once we've done one for Cisco, it should be a lot easier, I would think, to for other.
Yeah, I think so as well. You can take this and then use that as a starting point if you are a commercial vendor and you want to develop for something else.
Yeah.
Just like you can use the Redfish generic server plugin as a starting point for if you want to develop something for, yeah, you know, Dell or something else, right? So I think that's true, and also there is a complicated use case if you have two fabric managers, where and I'm not sure we have thought that through, and I'm not sure it's even a valid use case. Very rarely we should see something like that, I guess.
So these APIs are exposed through the ODIM northbound, right? The fabric and zone of zones based on this whatever Cisco API C plugins providing as part of ODIM.
I think the plugin will, and that's a good topic to talk about, Mercer. I think the plugin will host all the resources. So the plugin is basically the resource manager for everything under the fabric. Plus, keep in mind that a switch, for instance, will have while the switch will be under fabric. If you look at the Redfish spec, you have a collection of switches. There is a chassis component as well, and that needs to be put forward by this plugin. So if you have 9 switches in the fabric, there should be 9 chassis as well. And from each chassis, there should be a link to the switch. From each switch, there should be a link to the chassis. So, but generally, the plugin will be the management interface, and he will also be the resource manager and own those resources. Having said that, of course, ODIM needs to accept, and it already does today, fabric operations there where you want to manipulate those properties and objects that Martin talked about, endpoints, zone of endpoints. And ODIM will accept it and forward it down to this fabric manager. and then the fabric manager will need to do some operations. And if those operations take too long, the fabric manager needs to sort of let us know so we can create a task. There is all these complications, but it's not something we haven't done before, right? So.
Yeah, got it, Jonas. And how the composition service will consume these resources, for resource, we need to create resource blocks for this kind of APIs, right? So that's what.
Yeah, that part is a little bit abstracted away. Yes, you have to, but under the hood of all that, you're using these resources, right? Just like you're using resources on a compute system or resources on a for storage, right? It's kind of, and that is being mapped to resource blocks, and then that needs to be stored somewhere. So that's still, I guess you guys are deep into the discussions about the new composition service right now, but some of that I haven't paid too much attention to actually yet. So, Martin, you might be more into this, right?
Well, yeah. So the fabric, so fabrics aren't supported in the current composition service, and in the new one that's been devised, as I was saying earlier, that's going to be added later. So, but correct though that the way that it would be set up would be similar to what's been done with resource blocks and resource zones. The thing that would need to be factored into the composition service is the logical associations between the resource blocks, across a sort of third party thing, which would be the fabric itself, right? And as I was saying earlier, I've spoken to I sent a paper that I did a little while ago on the fabric schemas for supporting Ethernet switches, and that was to John Hass, who's the sort of primary guy looking at the new composition service. And he didn't seem to think there would be much issue in adding it as part of the new composition service. So, once that starts being implemented, then, and agreed across, the folks who are on the DMTF calls, then it'd be really good to see how that's going to be implemented as part of, what we're doing with ODIM as well. I already said to John that once this is agreed within DMTF, we're going to implement it in ODIM anyway. So, and seeing as he works for Dell, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So do you guys feel that, well, perhaps if anybody has any more questions, personally, I feel that when we started mapping the fabric model to these type of network exercises, and it was very, very complicated. So obviously this is something that we might not all understand at once, and perhaps I do not still understand everything, but on a conceptual level, I think perhaps it's enough to understand that, okay, we have a plugin for Fabric. The fabrics are supported by Redfish. It's something that the composition service will use in the future. And would it be a good thing to start with a Cisco type of plugin in the open source project? Those are the things I think it's enough for us to do a vote. It's my thinking.
Yeah, and also it's just for the work that I did just to do this mapping exercise, I'm pretty comfortable that we're not going to be committing unholy acts here in producing this plugin. It is actually feasible to do quite a nice mapping between what's already in Redfish and supported in the 2020.3 release and what Cisco have for their APIC controllers. So we wouldn't be on a sort of hiding to nothing in doing this. You know, it's definitely feasible, and we would have enough richness in redfish to you know, to have a fairly reasonable implementation done on Cisco.
Yeah. And also, I mean, most of this is obviously something we can discuss once we get into developing it. And there might be scenarios that will require us, when we look at a specific controller like the Cisco one now, to take something back to the MTF and make changes to the fabric model. That has been done quite a bit lately anyhow. But so we know that is an option and that works if they agree. And I mean, if you have a sensible use case, they usually do. So
yeah,
it's a good exercise. All right, if nobody has questions about this, I guess we could vote about it. Let me see if I'm a little concerned here. There are two things. First out, I don't see Louise here, so there is probably no recording going. Oh, actually, there is a recording going. Do you guys see that? It's a red dot. Does that mean it's recording? I think it is. It's blinking.
It is recording.
Okay. We didn't get the recording posted from our last TSC meeting, so I'll see if I can reach out and ask Louise to post that. It's good if we can record these votes at least. But so let's see here, chat. So vote for approval of the Fabric plugin for Cisco. On a conceptual level. I think it's better we say on a conceptual level, Martin, because there could be some changes in the mapping and stuff as people start moving forward on developing this. And
yeah,
that shouldn't really, we don't have to agree on all the details. You just gave the details for the purpose of understanding, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was just my interpretation of it, but obviously, you know, the people who are going to implement it are the ones that would be responsible for doing the actual mapping.
So do we do +1, -1, 0, or what is the? Okay, let's do that. +1 for agree then, -1 disagree. Okay. So let's see those votes come in. Are we missing somebody? No. Good. Very, very good. Perfect. So I will record this. Let me copy and paste then, just to make sure. Can't you copy and paste from the
Jonas,
chat window?
okay, sorry, no, I thought Muthu wasn't voted, but he has.
Yeah, so I saw he did. So
Sorry, Bharat, I mistakenly put into a window.
Ah, shit. I can't copy and paste, but I took down the votes. Or did we vote?
We haven't voted.
Okay, now we have. Very good. So, Bharat, good thing you're here. So if we look at the contribution proposals, we have this northbound SDK that is lingering there as well. Is that ready to be discussed, or did you have some internal discussions?
No, I think Gautam didn't talk to me.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So that's premature then. Perhaps I actually remove it from this, because this. Let me share here. Let's see if
I emailed you the copy paste as well if you had problems copy
Oh,
paste.
you could do that. Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
so I sent it by email.
Now I almost left the meeting. Okay, thanks so much, Daniel. Perfect. I'm going to remove this, the last proposal, because I thought we could talk about it, but I don't think we can. Let me work on that while we are not in the meeting. Is there anything else today then? Otherwise, we should be able to cut this a little shorter. Is there any other technical discussion that we are ready to have? I think the whole gRPC after Go Micro is something that we haven't really looked at further, because we have the release will come up here in end of January, and I think we will need to wait till after that to do something there. So we have frozen the version, forgot the version right now, but the version that is still has a permissive license versus the new commercial one.
Jonas, this is Muthu again. The
Yeah.
composition service, we discussed some time back about where are we positioned, whether it is within the ODIM or sitting on top of the ODIM, that is one part. The other thing is which version. The current version quite old, right? Everybody is aware of that, and also the new. There are a lot of changes going on in the new upcoming version. So which version we should focus? So we need to get inputs
Yeah,
from
I
all
thought.
of you guys.
Yeah, I was thinking you guys would decide that from AMI's point of view, but my sensible thoughts here, I mean, my gut feeling is that it's better to go after the newer version, unless that drags out forever. I think they're making some progress there. But are you thinking to perhaps implement the older version, Muthu, or?
No, we will. We are also thinking like it is better to go with the newer version, because we are also participating in the task force. There are a lot of changes going on, and it would be good, right, if we start with the newer version. But I need to get inputs from everybody if it is okay for everybody. And we also don't know when is the plan to the new version will be released. DMTF task force has its own timeline to release the newer schemas. Right?
Yeah. Did you get access from your representative to the GitHub?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I got access last week.
So at least you should have some access to some of the mock-ups, I guess.
Mock-ups, yeah. Now we have access to the GitHub portal on the DMTF Redfish group. Yeah, thank you so much.
No, that's good. I'm just because I guess it's hard to start any serious development right now because it's a moving target, right? But at least it should give you some ideas of how they're thinking, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, when you guys are ready to come up with a new proposal, and even if your new proposal is more conceptual, like you say, oh, we are going to implement the composition service based on the new one that is coming out, then we can start talking about things like how do we interact, what language are you going to do it in, how do we interact with the other services. And I think, you know, once we open up and get rid of Go Micro and open up for gRPC, we can move some of the core services that a lot of people are using, that the other services are using, into some sort of a more documented way. How do you interact with them? And it should be easy for you to have like a plug-in model or even a standalone type of thing, and be part of the stack anyhow, is my thinking. So what I'm saying is that you can still put forward a proposal and we can approve it. I think we don't need to wait for the composition service to be released, as long as you say that you're gonna align with it. At least that's my thinking. Anybody has any objections? Okay.
Yeah, now we have the access to the new proposal, schema that is going on, working is going on. Let us go through that, and we will prepare a proposal and update it in the Confluence, so that in the
Okay.
upcoming calls the forum can review it.
Yep. No, very good. Anything else for today? Otherwise, I'll give you some time back. All right. Sounds good.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Talk
Bye.
to you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. Bye.
Wonderful.